All right, folks, welcome to our workshop for mediumship, where you will learn a responsible, effective way to be a medium. Our presenter today is Dees Plant, all the way from Australia. We're very happy to have him today. And I'll let him do his explanation himself. But he's very knowledgeable, and you can't get a better educator and instructor to tell you what you need to know about how to effectively be a responsible medium. If you'll make sure your cell phones are off. Quickly, I would like everyone to just state their name and with maybe a 2 or 3 word sentence, tell us why you're here. We'll get the energy mingled, and we'll start with.
Hi, I'm Cindy.
I'm Crystal.
I'm Ada. This is my home away from home.
And I brought you, I'm new to it all, so we'll learn the right way.
I'm Adrienne, and I'm an open book. I'm ready to learn it all.
My name's Cynthia.
My name is Carol. I'm not a medium, but I'm a dowser, and I'm concerned about protecting myself.
Jean, I'm just here to learn.
I'm Bradley, and I'm here to learn new things too.
Carol, I'm here to learn as much as I can, and there's also my homework.
I'm Denise, and I'm just a student. Forever.
I'm Linda. Been a medium for 35 years, but I've never had any formal training, so I'm just curious. I just do it.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but today's not going to be formal either.
Good.
I'm Terry, and I want to know more so I can be a better medium. And this is my home away from home.
I'm Linda. I'm another one of those home away from home people, and I'm a student.
I'm Nori, and I'm just interested.
And I'm Becky. I'm a good friend of Loretta's by telephone, and I'm curious.
I'm Dees, pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I'm Loretta. Okay. And I'm Coretta, and with that, I'll let Dees go ahead and take the show. What?
Would you join me in a short prayer, please? Divine Spirit, we ask at this time for healing, help, knowledge, and wisdom for all the needy, sick, and searching, both on the physical planes and on the spirit planes. We ask this with the understanding that whatever might be given will be according to the individual's needs and your plan, not necessarily as we or they may wish it. We offer ourselves as willing, if imperfect, channels for whatever it may be possible to give or receive, for our own evolvement and for the benefit of others. And to this end, we ask for your assistance in being the purest and clearest channels that we can be. We offer thanks for whatever might be given in love, mercy, and compassion, and for all opportunities to serve. Okay, get the legals out of the way first. The views of this facilitator are not necessarily the views of this church or its management. End of legals. Mediumship seems to me to advance with increased spirituality. Not necessarily always, but most times. So to that end, I thought I'd make the first part of this workshop about developing and evolving spirituality. A lot of people will tell you that evolving spiritually, or growing spiritually, is a difficult process. I beg to differ. There is only one thing that you need to do to evolve or grow spiritually. That is to become a better person in your own estimation, nobody else's. A person who is more useful to both yourself and to the society in which you live. More loving, caring, tolerant, understanding, compassionate, and knowledgeable. In saying knowledgeable, I would suggest to you that you cannot claim to know anything. And I put know in inverted commas and capitals. Unless you can lay it out in front of everybody and say, there it is, proved beyond any question or shadow of doubt. So what I present to you today will be things that I have found to work for me and that a lot of other people have found to work for them each and every time I or they use them. On those things I base my life, and I also base what I pass to other people. I do not claim to be an expert. I am always open to learning. I consider that if I ever stop learning, I'll be dead from the neck up. I would also suggest that whatever I may tell you or present to you today, you do not take as gospel, but question it. See if it fits in your life. If it does, by all means, take it. If it doesn't, file it under wait and see, because somewhere down the track you may come across some other information that will give you a different understanding of it. And that is all you really can do. The other thing that I would suggest is that you increase your awareness of yourself, of who and what you are, and how you are feeling in any given situation. If you have any feeling of discomfort at all, analyse it. Ask what it is and why you have it, why you have chosen to have it, because nobody else can make you have any particular feeling. Every feeling that you have ever had in your life has been your own choice, either conscious or unconscious. A person can take a piece of 2x4, even with nails in it, and they can make you feel immense physical pain. They cannot make you feel any emotion unless you choose to have it. Unless you choose to respond to whatever they are doing in that particular way. So I would suggest to you at all times, be aware of your emotional state. Very often, the emotions or responses that we have to a given situation or to something that somebody has said are so deeply ingrained and so subconscious that we're not even aware of the thought processes that go into triggering them. And these are the things that rule your life. The thoughts you don't know you're thinking. So I would suggest to you, even if you can't do it at the time, any situation where you have a response that you are not aware of the processes behind it, pause sometime later and look at it and ask yourself what triggered those responses. Because somewhere back there in your past, and usually within this lifetime, there will be an experience that has caused that reaction. has trained your subconscious to have that response. And the more of those responses you can be aware of and learn not to allow to surface, but to make your responses conscious and measured, the closer you are to having an awareness of yourself that will evolve into deep spirituality. To me, the end goal of spiritual development is unconditional love. What is unconditional love? It is loving everything that is simply because it is, without judgment or reservation. But one of the things that I have never heard any other spiritual teacher say is that the measure of how loving you are is not only how freely and willingly and unreservedly you give love or you love others, but also how freely, willingly and unreservedly you accept love from others. Think about that for a moment and ask yourself, how willingly and unreservedly do you accept love from others? That is the best yardstick that I have yet come across to how loving a person is. Because if you don't accept love from others, you are depriving them of the opportunity to give love and to grow. You are also depriving yourself of the opportunity to receive love and grow. Take that thought with you everywhere you go. Unconditional love is not unachievable on this physical plane. However, particularly, enter at your peril, you may never be the same again. And take 3 or 4 good deep breaths down into your stomach as well as the chest. As I was saying, unconditional love is not unachievable on this physical plane. However, in our Western society, with all the influences that we are bombarded with, by the people around us, by commercial interests, advertising, TV, radio, the whole works and jerks, and the media's obsession with dwelling on the negative, it is a little harder than in some of the Eastern countries. People look at the Eastern countries and many Westerners feel sorry for them for their lack of material possessions. But I would put it to you that probably the easiest path to spiritual development and growth is to have less rather than more. Possessions very often bring with them feelings of ego that you have managed to accumulate so much into your life, and also fear that you may lose those things. And what is fear? Fear is false evidence appearing real. It is also the absence of love. Any emotion or feeling that is not love, that is unloving, is the absence of love. And include in that fear, hate, anger, jealousy, and all the rest of it. They are the negation of love, and they are a total waste of energy. I would also put it to you that grief is a total waste of energy. I have never yet come across a person who was grieving because somebody had departed this physical plane. The root feeling had to do with the fact that that person was no longer here with them. What that boils down to is self-pity, selfishness. That person's time on this physical plane had come to an end. We are basically date stamped in and date stamped out. And when we have achieved our purpose, our learning, that we have chosen for this particular lifetime, we're usually gone. There are some very rare exceptions to this. I emphasise the very part of it. 2 cases that I've come across have been mothers who had young families. And they had what the medical profession now calls near-death experiences. And both of them, when they got to the other side, pleaded to be allowed to come back because they had young families. They didn't plead to come back for themselves, they pleaded to come back for those who would be left behind. And that is probably the only reason they were allowed to come back, because what they were asking was unselfish. There are so many different aspects of spiritual development and involvement that it would be impossible to cover them all in an hour and a half, and I don't intend to try. All I'm going to try to do is to emphasise what I consider to be the main points. And probably the single most important point is awareness. Awareness of yourself, your feelings, the situations you are in, and awareness of others, of your effect on them, and their effect on you. Over my lifetime, I have had now 5 separate experiences where people have said things to me about how they view me, which have caused me to stop and look very seriously at my effect on others and how they perceive me. And each time it has been an eye-opener. I had not realised that people viewed me in that light. And each time it has been highly complimentary. Hopefully I've managed to keep my head and my ego within reasonable bounds. So at all times try to be aware of your responses to other people and things that are happening around you, things that are being said, but also try to be aware of your effect on other people. That is not to say that you are responsible for how other people respond to you, unless you have deliberately set out to provoke a response. But you are responsible to everything that you feel in response to what other people do or say. And one of the greatest lessons that I consider I have ever learned was to stop caring what other people may think or say about you. It is none of my business, and if you stop and think about it for long enough, I think you'll see that it actually says more about them than it does about you. So let them carry on their way. If they want to be negative or critical or whatever, if they want to be praiseworthy, whatever. It is saying more about them than it is about you. The only person whose judgment of you really matters is you. Many of us, in fact, far and away the great majority, are our own harshest critics. Why is that? It's real simple. Everybody else is too busy being their own harshest critic. Once you can learn to get to a point where you can be a critic who is constructive rather than destructive, you are well on the path to personal development, enlightenment, understanding. That brings us to self-analysis. This is another extremely important part of spiritual and personal development, but it is also very closely tied in with awareness. You need to be aware of what you are feeling and thinking and doing and saying before you can analyse it. When you start analysing it, analyse what you have said or done or thought or what you have felt, and analyse why you felt it. Ask yourself, was it positive or negative? And also, ask yourself, is it something you would like to have in your autobiography? Because each and every moment of your life, you are writing your own autobiography. Make each and every line, each and every page, each and every chapter something that you would be proud of. Something that you can look back on and say, I did good. There will be moments when you have situations and responses that you are perhaps slightly less proud of. Things that you might regard as a mistake. I would put it to you that there is no such thing as a mistake. Whether you are aware of it or not at the time, whatever you consider to be a mistake, you will learn from, which immediately removes it from the mistake category and puts it in the lesson that needed to be learned category. And if you have learned from it, you don't go back and repeat that thing again. Give yourself a pat on the back. If you do go back and repeat it, ask yourself why. I had that lesson before. Why didn't I learn from it then? How many kicks in the backside do I need, or belts over the head do I need before I finally get this? Some people can learn by observation. The great majority of us need the hard lessons. We need to experience them ourselves. In experiencing them ourselves, we can learn to understand them. But one of the greatest tricks you can possibly achieve in your path to spiritual development is to learn by observing others. And when you see a situation unfolding involving other people, look at it and ask yourself what would be your responses. And see if you can observe their responses, or at least those that they show. And ask yourself, would they be things that you would be proud of? Or would they be things that you would rather not have in your life? And in that way you can learn from observing others. Believe me, that is far and away the easiest way to learn. the least painful. There is another aspect of observing others. Something like 85 to 90% of all of our communication is non-verbal. Body language. The way other people perceive us. And we cannot control how they perceive us other than trying to present what we perceive ourselves as being the best possible image. Other people will guaranteed perceive it differently. Maybe not terribly differently, but they will perceive it differently because they have a whole different background. And you have no control over that. Don't let it concern you. It goes back to don't worry about what other people may think or say about you because it's none of your business. It says more about them than it does about you. But at all times, try to present your best possible image. If you get into a situation where you're uncertain, ask yourself how you would like to be perceived and try to behave in a manner that projects that. Again, it doesn't matter what other people think of whatever you project, so long as you perceive it as being the best that you can do with what you have at that time. There may come a time later on in your life when you look back on that situation and say, I could have done better there. Why didn't I? Take your spurs off. Don't ride yourself. Because down the track you have gained more knowledge, more understanding, more awareness. Give yourself a pat on the back for doing the best that you could in that situation with the knowledge that you had at the time. Nobody has any right to ask any more of you, not even yourself. Again, stop being your own harshest critic. Learn to love yourself. Learn to love everything about you, even if you perceive it to be a negative. It doesn't matter. Because it has something to teach you. And if you look into that and learn from it, it will cease to be a negative. You will either turn it into a positive, or it will disappear from your life, your behaviour, your thinking. And that is the end goal of spiritual development. Getting rid of everything that we don't need. And you would be absolutely surprised, blown away by all the things that you don't need. Most of the things that we feel we need are attached to ego and a feeling that is, as far as I'm able to determine, exclusive to the human race. A fear of lack, or a lack consciousness, if you like. The dumb animals wake up each morning, they go out, they feed on God's nature's bounty, and at night they bed down somewhere, go to sleep, and wake up the next morning and do exactly the same. With not a moment's thought about, is there going to be enough? Yes, there are some species which hoard food away for a winter, squirrels and their nuts, etc. That is simply an instinct of animals that have not learned to hibernate. And not every creature can hibernate successfully. Bears will eat and gorge themselves as much as they possibly can before they go into hibernation. And their body weight may reduce by as much as 1/3 during their hibernation, which would help to explain why when they come out of hibernation they can be just a tad testy. Think about it, if you were deprived of food for 5 months, how testy would you be? Could you survive? No. So, various animals have coped with nature in various ways. Us humans have developed an instinct where we are fearful of a lack. Why? How many of you have ever gone hungry for extended periods? I know I have. Have faith that it will be there. Try to ditch that fear too, because it is holding you back just as much as any other fear you have. And it is also indicative of a lack of faith in what the big fellow will provide. And that lack of faith can extend into all sorts of areas of our lives. Each and every time you feel a fear about something, it is evidence of a lack of faith. Examine it. Ask yourself why you have it. And what aspect of your lack of faith is it highlighting? It has something to teach you. Don't hate it. Don't wish you didn't have it. Treasure it, because it has something to teach you. And from that, you can and will grow. Each and every aspect of yourself that you don't like, you have for a reason. It is there to help you learn something. Examine it. Ask yourself why it is there and learn from it. And in the process, love it, because it has been given you to help you learn something. And in learning to love the things that you don't like about yourself, you are increasing your power to love others as well as yourself. Almost every aspect of spiritual development, growth, evolvement, call it what you want, comes back to love. It comes back to loving yourself, and it comes back to loving others. It comes back to loving everything that is. Society has a habit of saying that some people love themselves too much. Well, yes, I guess that is possible. But I would dispute that it is love. It is more ego. Any person who appears to have an inflated opinion of themselves has usually let ego get in the way. I had a lady friend down home. She has since passed. She and her husband were extremely good hypnotherapists. And 3 times, she was also very intuitive. He was to a lesser extent, but he didn't acknowledge it. But 3 times she got to thinking, gee, I'm getting pretty good at this. Suddenly her intuition vanished. Gone. They dropped her. Splot. And she had to start to learn to listen to her intuition all over again. And the 3rd time, she stopped and asked, and why did that happen? penny finally dropped. She got all big-headed about it and thought that it was all her own effort. She had denied Spirit's involvement in it. 3 times she got a very sharp reminder, hey, we're here helping. Acknowledge us too. In your wanderings through your spiritual development, you will come across situations where you look at a person and immediately you are aware that they have issues. It is not your job to go to that person and start helping with their issues, unless they are in an environment and you are in an environment and a situation where it is accepted behaviour. Even then, ask. There are 19 healers here today. How many of you have ever thought of yourselves as healers?
What was that again?
Healer. Have you ever considered yourself to be a healer?
Oh.
So we got 4 people that raised their hand out of 19, really?
3. Yeah.
6 altogether.
We do is physical, spiritual, or emotional.
Any healing, just healing. Right. So that leaves 11 or 12, 11, 10 who don't consider themselves to be healers. I sometimes wonder how many people get up there on that platform and give an address. They think to themselves, I'm giving healing. Because as sure as God made little apples, that is what they are doing. There may be only one person in the congregation who needs to hear that message. But that one person is receiving healing, as well as knowledge and understanding. There is not a single human being on the face of the planet who does not have the capacity to be a healer, or a healing channel, which is the term that I prefer to use. There are 2 things that it takes to unlock that: love and compassion. Each and every time you allow yourself to be used as a channel for healing, rather than trying to do it of, from, and by yourself, it is like pouring water through a pipe. You can't do it without getting the insides of the pipe wet, which means some of the healing energy stays with you. Would you like to be able to get energy out of you? And you don't have to be a hands-on healer. You don't have to be a qualified therapist. Very often, all the healing that is needed is simply to listen to somebody. And I'm not talking about just sitting there while they talk. I'm talking about listening to them. Giving the impression that you actually care for them and what they are saying. But in giving that impression, I would very definitely emphasise that it needs to be genuine. Because if it's not, body language will give you away. That person will eventually realise that you're acting. Just the same as each and every one of you have had situations in your life where somebody has expressed concern, said they wanted to be there for you, but when you start getting into it, they don't care. Now, hands up anybody here who has never had the experience of meeting somebody for the first time and immediately either feeling drawn to them or not wanting to be in their company.
Who's had that experience?
No one's had that.
Who hasn't had that
I was
experience?
going to say.
I didn't think so. The best explanation I have ever heard for that is that either consciously or subconsciously you are tuning into that person's aura. And it doesn't matter whether it's conscious or subconscious. You are doing it. Which means that you have the ability to be a channel, to be receptive. And when you understand that you can be receptive and you open yourself to it, you then have the basis on which to become a medium. Yes, it takes the willingness to open your mouth and to pass it on to other people, but you have the basic tools to be a medium. I would also be prepared to bet that most of you, in fact probably all of you, have at some time in your life been talking to somebody or they've been talking to you, and the thought has come into your mind about what they're saying or how they're saying it, or that they are not saying everything about what they're talking about. That is mental telepathy. It's also mediumship. Very, very few mediums actually understand that mediumship is purely and simply mental telepathy. It works so much better between spirit and us than it does between us and us, because spirit does not have a physical body to cloud their transmission and reception. Which brings up a little point. If you still your mind for long enough and effectively enough to stop outside physical influences interfering, you can improve your mental telepathy powers immeasurably. Practice stilling your mind. There are a few exercises that I have picked up over the years, which I'll now pass on to you, because they are also very effective in learning to receive from Spirit for your own benefit, your own growth, your own development. The first one is to visualise a pool of water. The wind is blowing across it, the surface is rippled. You take a stone and toss it into that pool. There will be a pattern of ripples spreading out from the point of impact of that stone, which will be disturbed by the ripples already on the surface of the pool. That is basically our normal mind state. Now completely still the surface of that pool so that it's like a cup of tea or a mirror. And take another stone and toss into that pool. And you will get a perfectly concentric pattern of ripples spreading out from that point of impact. That is the state that you aim for when trying to communicate with Spirit. That completely clear mind. And you don't have to be able to maintain it for hours. You basically only need to be able to achieve it and hold it for a few seconds. And allow Spirit to start dropping thoughts in there to give you something else to focus on. It is no great strain to achieve, and it is very definitely achievable. But for a lot of people, it can take practice. So give yourself the time to practice. And don't kick yourself in the backside when you find it's not working the way you want it to. Settle down, breathe deeply, and try again. If it doesn't work, ask yourself why. When you find out why, go and deal with that why. And come back and try again. The next exercise is to imagine yourself dialing a number on one of the old things on the dial, telephones. You finish dialing the number, you can hear it ringing, and you're not sure who's going to answer on the other end. So your mind's pretty much a blank while you're waiting to see who does answer. And see how long you can hold that blank state. The third one actually involves concentration and visualization. To close your eyes and to project on the back of your eyelids the first initial of your name, and to see how long you can hold it, how clear you can get it, and how long you can hold it. Then when you've got that one down pat, visualise the second initial of your name and see how long you can hold that and how clear you can get it. Do that with every initial in your name. Then if you want to take a step further, visualise your whole first name. See how clear you can get it and how long you can hold it. How long you can focus your concentration on one particular thing. It's not easy, and I will not try to kid you that it's easy, but practice will help. And it is a very valuable asset in mediumship. Training your mind to exclude outside thoughts, unrelated thoughts. Having said that, I'll tell you a little story about mediumship that happened back in 1982, if my memory serves me rightly. I was sitting in a circle run by a woman who was a minister of a Spiritualist church and also a pretty well recognised medium and teacher at that time. And she is still running a Spiritualist church today, still pretty well recognised medium and teacher. After the circle was over, we were having supper. I was doing some healing on one lady. I'd been doing it for several minutes. And I looked over at a gentleman sitting over there with this lady sitting on a chair here. I said to her, this gentleman, can you place for me a lady named Min or Minnie? And he said, yes, that was my Aunt Minnie. He said, I spent nearly as much time with her when I was a young kid as I did with my mother. And I started passing on Aunt Minnie's message. And this woman who was running the circle, the minister, the medium, the facilitator, looked at me and said, how can you be doing healing there and giving a reading there? I said, I don't know, but it's happening. You do not have to limit yourself in what you are doing at any one time. Women are far better at multitasking than men. But one of their failings is that they tend to limit themselves. How can I be doing that and that at the same time? It's not you that's doing it. It is Spirit working with you. And two different spirits doing two different jobs. One healing here, one passing a message over there. Science has difficulty coming to terms with just how capable the human mind is, because they tend to restrict themselves to the notion that the human mind is contained within the skull. It ain't. A lot of people have a lot of different names for what I consider to be the human mind. Some call it the spirit, the soul, the higher self, whatever. Nobody has yet proven to me that my understanding that the human mind is each of those things is incorrect. To me, the brain is purely and simply a transmitting station or a telephone exchange. It appears to work extremely quickly in most situations. Most times, but not always, quick enough to get us out of danger. It can work quick enough for people in the quick draw clubs to receive a signal and draw their gun and fire it in a quarter of a second. If you want to know how long a second is, say to yourself, 1 little second. They have drawn their gun, fired and hit the target in a quarter of that time upon receiving a signal. That, to me, is fairly quick. Other people have managed to get themselves out of danger, probably in less time than that. Or at least their response in less time than that has got them out of danger. And each and every one of us is capable of that. The only restriction is our own personal perceptions of ourselves and our abilities. Many people will tell you, try to think outside the box. Personally, I prefer not to acknowledge the existence of a box. Do not reject any thoughts or ideas simply because you don't understand them or they are beyond your experience. If they interest you or intrigue you, search deeper into them. And that includes aspects of yourselves. Because each and everything that you uncover about yourself and learn to understand will contribute to your spiritual growth and development. My very first spiritual teacher, going back to 1970, said some words that I have never forgotten. If you want to develop spiritually, study yourself. And when you have studied yourself, study yourself. And when you have studied yourself, study yourself. You will never stop learning about yourself. And each little thing that you learn will contribute to your spiritual growth and development. It is an ongoing process, and it will never cease until the day you are ready to be put in that wooden box. And even then, you will return to spirit. You will start looking at your life. You will start analysing it. You will start understanding the lessons that you were presented here in ways that you don't understand them here. And you will still be learning. Far better from my own personal point of view to devote some time and some effort to learning to understand those lessons here and now, because they have the ability, the capacity to make your life easier. They also have the capacity to make you a more useful member of the society in which you live. And the whole essence of living in a society is to contribute to that society, to help make it a better place for all people to live in and to learn in. Whether that society is simply this church, or smaller scale, this group, or whether it encompasses the whole world, is immaterial. Spiritual development boils down to becoming a more useful person to yourself and to those around you. More loving, caring, compassionate, understanding, and tolerant. Anything that you can do that you perceive contributes to that goal comes very definitely under the heading of spiritual development. Doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it personal development, you can call it growing up, you can call it maturing, what you like. It is all very much the same thing. The labels don't matter. What matters is that you perceive yourselves to be moving forward, to becoming better people. One of the little tricks to becoming a better person is to dispense with judgment. I did a rebirth training course with my then partner back in 1994-95. And the lady who was running that course insisted that we all read a book called Forgiveness, the only diet there is. It made such an impact on me that I can't even remember the author. I read the blurb on the back cover, and part of the introduction, and part of the first couple of pages, and I put the book down and said, I've gone beyond this. The next weekend of the course, the lady who was facilitating it asked how we'd all got on with the book. When she came to me, I said, I've gone beyond that. She said, you can't go beyond that. That's all there is. I said, I've still gone beyond it. How can you go beyond it? I said, it's simple. Forgiveness is only necessary if first you make a judgment that there is something to forgive. If you don't make that judgment, then forgiveness is unnecessary. You will hear ministers in all sorts of churches, all sorts of people in all sorts of places talking about forgiveness. Each and every time you hear that, ask yourself, how judgmental is that person? Because they have not yet got their head around the notion that the only reason there is any need for forgiveness is that they have made a judgment. And the woman who was facilitating that course, by the end of the course, still had not got her head around that notion. As a 5-year-old, she had felt unloved by her father. So she had gone down the road to her father's brother's farm and got her love there. Abuse. And she had never let go of it. And she was trying to teach people rebirthing and dealing with emotional pain when she hadn't dealt with her own. It is not necessary to have dealt with all of your emotional pain before you start trying to help others. What is necessary is that you have an understanding that you have emotional pain and try not to project that on others. Now, how many people here in this room can say that they honestly feel they have no emotional pain? I'll put my hand up. Those of you who were here when I gave the address from the platform, and I think the previous week, heard me tell about when my son died of leukemia. Those of you who weren't here, I'll tell the story quickly. My firstborn son was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia at the age of 4, 3 days after his 4th birthday. He died 6 months later. The worst time I had with anything that resembled grief was 6 weeks before he died. On the day we were told that they'd run out of treatments, that he had no chance. And they said he had about 6 weeks to live. It turned out to be pretty close to the mark. After that interview, I had to drive 2 hours from that hospital back to where we were living at the time to pack up the house and move it closer to the hospital. For an hour and 50 minutes of that trip, I was as angry as hell that he was being taken so young without a chance to learn, to grow, to experience life. 10 minutes before I arrived at the destination, without the slightest change in my driving, and I can still remember the bend that it happened on, I pulled that train of thought up and I asked myself, with my understanding and my beliefs, why am I thinking like this? I know he doesn't need to be here to learn and to grow. From that moment on, no grief, no anger, no sadness. I have simply celebrated the 4.5 short years that I did have with him and the lessons of his love and his courage. And 10 years later, to the month, I did the same thing when my mother passed away from leukemia. The treatment was getting so painful that she said to the doctors, no, that's it, no more treatment. She phoned each of us 4 children and told us of her decision. At that time, she was in Perth, Western Australia, and I was living 2,500 miles away on the east coast of Australia. We said our goodbyes over the phone, and I didn't even go back for the funeral. I didn't need to, because we had already said our goodbyes, and I knew that she was in a better place. And I was celebrating the fact that I had had her as my mother to start me on the path that I've been walking ever since, which has led to me sitting here talking to you. For each and every one of you who is experiencing any sort of grief, I would suggest you look at it carefully, and rather than feeling negative about it, try to celebrate having known that person and what they have taught you, what they have shared with you, what you have shared with them. 2 of the most selfish emotions there are in the human spectrum are grief and romantic love. Some ears pricked up there. Romantic love, selfish. Yes, it is selfish, because you do not want to share that person with anybody else in the specific intimate ways that you are sharing with them. Yeah, it makes a certain amount of sense. But again, it's a limitation, both on yourself and that other person. And it is selfish. In grieving, you are not grieving because that person has left this physical plane. You are grieving because they are no longer here with you. In essence, you are holding them back from the growth that they can achieve on that spiritual plane by continually pulling them towards you. And do not ever think that your thoughts about grief and that person no longer being here with you don't have some pull on them. Would you want to be held back? I would bet no for each and every one of you. By all means, think of that person, but think of them with love, and think of them progressing along paths that they have chosen, and celebrate the fact that they have been in your life and that you have learned them. And that goes not only for the ones that you loved, but for the ones that you had some difficulty loving, because they also had something to teach you. There is no single experience that will ever happen to you in your life that doesn't have something to teach you. Whether you consider it to be a positive experience or a negative experience is immaterial. Sometimes it's the negative experiences that have more to teach you than the positive ones. In fact, probably more often, the negative ones have more to teach you than the positive ones. So does anybody have any questions on what we've said so far?
Ask up. We're going to take a break in about 20 minutes, so now's your time to ask some questions. Really? Is anybody awake? Yay. Any about the earlier question about clearing your mind, creating a space where you can get quiet in your head, anything at all? Yes?
Would you repeat those three different things about stilling our mind,
Most assuredly.
please?
The first one was the pool of water. Visualize it first with the ripples on the surface. Throw a stone in. You will have a pattern of ripples spreading out from the point of impact, which is confused by the ripples already on the surface. Capiche? Then completely still the pool of water. And throw another stone in. And you will have a perfectly concentric pattern of ripples spreading out from the point of impact. That clear surface is the state of mind that you are striving for.
I'm sorry. I have it written down. Still the pool, throw in a rock, and make the ripples consecutive. Is that what you said?
You will have a perfectly concentric pattern of ripples.
But then it's no longer smooth. But it's not the smooth.
No, but you're looking for that smooth state so that spirit can drop the stone into your mind. That make it clearer? Good. I'm glad you asked. The second one is dialing one of the old finger dial telephones. And then wait for some unknown person to answer on the other end. And your mind is vacant until you know who's going to answer.
That might be someone that's coming forward from the spirit world.
No, it's just you practicing to clear your mind. This is an exercise. You may find while you're doing it that spirit does come through. Having that opportunity with both hands. And the third one was visualising the initials of your name. First, one at a time, and then more than one.
Would you repeat that, please?
The third exercise was close your eyelids and project your first initial on the back of your eyelids. Get it as clear as you can and hold it for as long as you can.
First initial of your name.
Yep.
focus. And keep practicing.
Yep. And when you've got the first initial of your name down pat, do it with the second initial of your name. And then if you happen to have a third, fourth, fifth, sixth initials, do it with them too. Then try and project your whole first name and hold that. That is simply an exercise in focusing. Focusing your mind.
In doing that, I just tried that. I could see it behind each eyelid at the same time, but didn't look the same. So is that unusual? Is that weird? I mean, one was a little blurry, and one was very clear.
Well, I thought you were a little weird all along.
But if I projected out here, it was just one clear.
Well, when you close your eyes, it doesn't matter where the screen is.
I was putting it right on each eyelid.
Are you short-sighted or long-sighted, are you?
Okay, I just want to make sure I was doing it correctly.
Okay, has everybody got that one clear?
I have a question regarding the selfishness of relationships. So the way that I relate that information then is when you're in an intimate relationship with somebody and then that relationship is ended, that's as long as they're meant to be in your life and the lessons that you've learned. So it's okay to let that go and then allow somebody else to enter your space. So even the concept of either marriages or any of those end, there's no failure involved. That was just the time and space in which you were meant to be there. Now you're open to receive somebody else that will continue to teach you.
Yep.
Okay.
Most religions like to preach the sanctity of marriage and that it should be a lifetime commitment. That's all very well and good so long as both parties want it to continue to be a commitment to each other. But when one party doesn't want to be there any longer, what the hell is the point of trying to keep it together?
I think so many people beat themselves up though that they're giving in or they're letting go or they're not trying hard enough and then people get stuck in those emotions.
Pardon me. And all of those emotions are negative.
I think they made that rule when people died at 39 or 40.
Sorry?
I think they made that rule when people, our lifespan was about 40.
Yep. Well,
Forever. Yeah.
You get sick of it.
or
Because you
even
needed
less.
that person to survive. I think
Yeah.
they walked away from the door. Yeah, but that doesn't apply now.
It's really still.
Well, it still does apply to the extent that it is there to ensure that a family can be raised in a safe, loving environment. But if the two people no longer get on with each other, then there may be a safe environment, but one would have to put some question marks over that. But how loving is it?
Or for the people around them getting the sparks.
Yeah, including the kids.
Especially the
I
kids.
think too, nature,
Sorry?
procreation, nature, people get married, they have 2 kids. Okay, we're happy we have 2 kids.
Yes.
So at 7 years, they get a divorce, they start another family. So I think it has something to do with natural procreation too, that you're not stuck with just 2
And sometimes
kids.
it doesn't even last 7 years.
Yeah. But then maybe a successful man divorces his older wife, he marries a younger lady, he has kids with this younger lady, he has more time for him because he's not working all the time, and he's passing his success genes on.
How many of you have heard of something called the infatuation complex?
It's pretty simple. Which is lust at first sight.
Which is fantasy thinking.
Well,
Which is kind of
no.
induced.
I'll explain the infatuation complex so that you're all clear about it. The infatuation complex is that first flash of love/lust. And it is there It usually lasts for somewhere between 12 months and 2 years. And its purpose is to conceive a child and have that child born and start it on a journey to self-sufficiency in a reasonably safe environment. Once that infatuation wears off, that's when you need to start working at the relationship if you want it to continue. And so many people experience that infatuation and think that it's everlasting love. Nobody has ever loved like this before. Who
That's
the
just
hell
called
are
work.
you deluding?
Yourself.
But having said that, for two reasonably mature people with some understanding of relationships and love, even when that infatuation wears off, it is possible to still have a long-term loving relationship.
That's fair.
And the extent to which those two people can achieve that is some gauge of their maturity and their understanding. You really start running into snags when one person has the maturity and the other one doesn't.
There you go.
No judgment is necessary. It simply is. Each person is at a different level of involvement, and each person has different lessons to learn. Which goes back to the question you asked about letting go. If you want to know if something is yours, let it go. If it comes back, it is yours. If it doesn't come back, it never was. As simple as that. Both genders have issues with letting go. Very often for different reasons. But they both have issues with letting go. They also both have issues with staying put. Again, very often for different reasons. There is no right or wrong about it. Billy Shakespeare did us all a real good favour way back when he put those words in Hamlet's mouth. There is no right or wrong, but thinking makes it so. Whatever is simply is. And it cannot be wrong if somebody learns from it. It is there for a reason. And that includes short-term relationships, long-term relationships, anything that you might regard as a mistake. It also includes anything you might regard as a success that you get all big-headed about. Because there's a learning in that too. Any further questions?
Is the feeling of grief the same as the feeling of loss?
Grief.
No, it's not the same.
Not the same. Because my sister just died, and I love thinking of her on the other side because I know how free she is and how tethered to her bed and pain she was. But I feel the loss of not being able to talk to her.
Get some moments of peace and see if your belief that you can't talk to her is actually true.
Well, actually, I have to talk.
You stated that well. You missed the physical body, and that's perception of you assume that because she isn't physically here, she's no longer present.
Yeah, I do feel that.
But you know she's present. Right.
But then there's different kinds of grief too. We have many instances of grief throughout our lives, not to do with someone dying.
I have only had one that lasted for an hour and 50 minutes. At one stage of the proceedings, I was a sperm donor for a fertility clinic back home. And one of the things that they subject you to is a fairly intense psychological examination. And the psychologist who was doing the examination refused to believe that I didn't have any emotional issues. Whether what I told him was true or not, I don't know. But to the best of my understanding of myself, I don't have any emotional issues. I haven't for quite a long time. Any further questions?
Would you call that unconditional love? Aren't we all learning to love unconditionally?
No, I wouldn't call it unconditional love, because I still have reservations about loving some people as much as I love others. But I also like to kid myself that I'm a hell of a lot closer to unconditional love now than I was back then. Maybe I am kidding myself, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that I am. And that is not me being big-headed, it is me being objective. This is something I would say to you too. When you're looking at issues in your life about which you are not happy or which you feel you have something to learn from, look at them objectively, not subjectively. Stand outside and look at the scene of you and whoever else was involved as something separate from yourself. And then see if you would be proud of the actions of the character that is you. Does that make sense? Do it objectively and non-judgmentally. And simply assessing whether the actions of the character that was you are something that you would be proud of is an assessment, not a judgment. Capiche?
So, what I'm understanding you to say and what I believe is that you can see a situation that doesn't necessarily harmonize with what you would want for your life. Mm-hmm. And you can still love any person that's involved in it unconditionally without allowing yourself to be part of what they're doing. You can make assess the situation, and then you can take your own steps. And you want to be proud of the steps you've taken. And you can still be unconditionally loved.
Yeah. Okay. It ain't easy, but it's possible.
I just have a comment on that. Something I was told years ago is first you have to see what you're doing, and then you can change it. And what you said about know yourself, the more I study yourself, the more I know myself. And that's so freeing. You can't change it without knowledge. So it's been very, very helpful.
You always think it's the other person.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things I've learned from 12-step. Never the other person. Never. When you're upset with someone, it's never them. And it's not. It sucks. It all comes home.
Most people would accept...
But it works.
Yeah.
It's true. It's a shortcut.
Most people would accept that Einstein was a fairly smart lad.
Yeah.
Einstein once commented that no problem can be solved in the same consciousness that created it. So if you feel you have a problem, you need to get out of the consciousness that created it to solve it. Something has to change. And the easiest thing to change is your own consciousness, awareness, perception. Just as I changed my perception an hour and 50 minutes into that trip after I discovered that my son had no chance. And the change in perception was pretty much instantaneous, for which I'm very thankful. Some of your changes in perception may not be that quick. Doesn't matter. What does matter is that you allow them to happen.
What about compassion for people?
That is an integral part of love. It is very difficult, in fact I would say impossible, to be a genuinely loving person without compassion. Compassion does not necessarily mean emotional involvement. It means having an understanding and an empathy for that situation or that person. Pardon me. And I would also bet that there is not one uncompassionate person here in this room. If you didn't have compassion, you wouldn't have got off your backsides and come here.
Okay, having that been said, you all can be back at 20 after 12 and we can get started again. You have a 15-minute break.
If you
But if
brought
you'd
your
like to
lunch,
sit around and
fine.
talk,